In 1321, Italy's greatest poet, Dante Alighieri, had the chance to visit the city of Venice. Walking along the eastern edge of the city, he witnessed a spectacle that would freeze one's blood. Thousands of bare-chested men plunging into thick smoke and dust, sweating profusely under the intense heat of boiling vats of pitch. The deafening sound of hammers blotted out the sky. That scene haunted Dante so much that he locked it straight into his masterpiece, the Divine Comedy, envisioning it as the eighth circle of hell. But what is the truth? That place was not hell. It was the largest industrial complex on the planet, and the most ridiculous irony of history lies here. The greatest, most magnificent, and unimaginably wealthy city in Europe at the time was built on a stinking saltwater mudflat, without a single inch of land to grow crops, not a single oar of stone, not even fresh water to drink. Today, we will peel off the romantic mask of poetic houses amidst the waterways of Venice. We will step together into the suffocating forges, smell the acrid pitch, and dissect the most ruthless, sophisticated production machine medieval history has ever witnessed. Welcome to the 14th century Republic of Venice. Rome was built with marble. Those who fled from Rome built Venice from millions of trees, planted upside down into an anaerobic swamp. Venice was not born from glory, it was born from fear. In the 5th century, as barbarian tribes swept across the Italian peninsula, desperate refugees fled to the saltwater lagoons along the Adriatic coast. Imagine where they stood knee-deep in mud, erratic tides rising and falling, the stench of decomposing algae piercing their noses. How do you build a palace weighing thousands of tons on that sludgy mud? They drove in millions of oak, alder, and pine trunks, felled from the mainland. They were sharpened, then driven vertically by human strength, tens of meters deep down to the hard clay layer firmly stuck beneath the bottom of the lagoon. The miracle of nature is that when buried deep in the saltwater mud, completely deprived of oxygen in an anaerobic state, wood cannot rot. Over time, minerals from the seawater seeped in, petrifying these wooden trunks, making them as hard as iron and stone. An entire upside-down forest bore the weight of Gothic churches, stone-paved squares, and gold-plated mansions above. Geography dictates destiny. The very lack of arable land and resources forced Venice onto a single path of survival, becoming maritime merchants. Unable to walk, they designed a canal system instead of roads. From a wretched refugee camp by the 14th century, Venice had transformed into the monopoly valve connecting two worlds. They siphoned silk spices and aromatics from the sun-drenched east, distributing them to a Europe starving for luxury. The once muddy swamp had now become the throne of the ocean. How do you squeeze the wallets of every foreign merchant coming to your city while they still smile and obediently hand their gold and silver over to you? The answer is build them a velvet prison. Stand with me on the wooden Rialto Bridge on a bustling morning in the 14th century. Beneath our feet, the Grand Canal is jammed with hundreds of ships, large and small. The screams of haggling in dozens of different languages, Arabic, German, Greek, blending with the rumbling sound of anchors dropping into the water. Your nose would be assaulted by an insane mixture of scents. The pungent smell of cinnamon nutmeg and black pepper spilling from sacks, the sour sweat of sailors who had just spent months adrift, and the strong fishy stench from the adjacent market. Venice did not welcome vague free trade. Looking right next to the Rialto Bridge, you will see a colossal imposing architectural block, the Fondaco dei Tedeschi building. This was a place exclusively for German and Northern European merchants. But when a German merchant carrying chests of white silver stepped over this threshold, he was instantly disarmed. The oak doors slammed shut. He was forced to eat, sleep, store his goods, and conduct all buying and selling transactions exclusively in the inner courtyard of this building. Beneath the guise of lavish hospitality, the Fondaco was in fact a ruthless capitalist checkpoint. By confining all foreign capital, the Venetian nobility ruthlessly collected taxes on every single peppercorn sold, enforced exchange rates favorable to their currency, and most importantly, prevented spies from stealing maritime maps. You could bring money to Venice to buy luxury, but you were never allowed to take the core secrets of Venice with you when you left. While the rest of Europe was still whittling each piece of wood to build a single ship over many months in a hidden corner of Venice, a man-eating machine was spitting out a super warship every single day. It's time for us to step into the place that once terrified Dante Alighieri out of his wits. Concealing 15% of the city's area, enclosed by 3.2 kilometers of massive fired brick walls, where no unauthorized person was allowed to linger, is the Arsenale, the mechanical heart of the empire. Let's open the heavy wooden gates and step inside. A blast of sweltering hot air hits us right in the face. More than 16,000 people are working at a frantic pace. In the central area, boiling pitch furnaces bubble with black sludge, spewing out columns of smoke that obscure the sun. Bare-chested workers with blackened skin use giant brooms to smear that molten liquid onto the hulls for waterproofing. But the true power of the Arsenale lies in a long canal running right through the center of the factory. This was the world's very first moving assembly line. Unlike the rest of the world, which built the hull first, Venetian shipwrights mass-produced standardized oak-ribbed frames. A bare framework was launched into the canal. From here, the ship did not sit still. It was slowly towed past a row of warehouses on both banks. The first window dropped down giant pine masts. The ship drifted to the second window, where weavers dropped down the ropes and anchors. The third window supplied cannons and gleaming metal armor, and at the final window, dry bread was dumped into the cargo hold for the sailors. At the end of the canal, the ship had transformed into a floating fortress, ready to tear through the waves and set sail. By breaking down complex processes into simple sequential tasks and using a system of standardized interchangeable parts, a rudder-made could fit perfectly onto any ship. Venice reached the pinnacle of industrial efficiency. Without the need for electronic machinery, using only muscle power, perfect logistical arrangements, and suffocating deadline pressure, they created a production line centuries ahead of its time. This was not a carpentry workshop. This was a factory that manufactured power. The Arsenale was the answer to Venice's absolute power. You couldn't have the monopolistic Muda trade system without fleets of warships escorting them to protect the goods from pirates and hostile navies. These fleets turned Venice into a central core, directly connecting to the radiant Constantinople, the bustling port of Alexandria in Egypt, and reaching all the way to the foggy western ports. The flow of goods they manipulated included everything the world lusted after, from spices more expensive than gold soft silk to cold armories and even the lives of caravans of slaves. Today, the walls of the Arsenale still stand there, casting their reflection onto the water in the blazing red sunset. But the deafening sound of hammering, the acrid smell of pitch, and the roaring of thousands of Arsenalotti workers have faded completely into the past. When we look at Venice today, we usually just see a romantic tourist city, slowly sinking beneath the sea level with every breath of time. But the true legacy of Venice does not lie in that melancholic beauty. When Dante Alighieri shuddered before the boiling vats of pitch 700 years ago, he didn't realize that those grimy, mud-covered workers were forging the key that would shape our world, the division of labor achieving mechanical precision, the global logistics supply chain, multinational corporations monopolizing wealth insurance contracts, and escort warships. All of those machines were successfully designed, assembled, and test-driven right on the green canals of the Venetian swamp. Today, as we face colossal megafactories producing millions of smartphones every day, as we face data harvesting algorithms and global crises, are we truly progressing any further than the people of the 14th century? Or are we still just tiny gears being swept into a modern invisible Arsenale that expansively encompasses this entire planet? True power has never resided in flashy palaces. It always resides in the place that creates the gears of the era. I am Robert Langdon from History Reconstruction. Thank you for accompanying us in turning back these pitch-scented pages of history to deeply understand the machine that runs our present world. If you found value in this journey, Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so that history can continue to be reborn. See you in the next chapters of history.